it melds so well with the Buddhist path, especially Zen, right? Zen is supposedly, the famous saying is, the taste of tea and the taste of Zen, very similar. Still requires that you sit down, you steep each little cup, and you pour it out after a certain amount of time, and it just requires your attention. And that attention, combined with the uplifting effects of caffeine and the calming and sort of smoothing out effects of theanine, it induces a kind of Zen state where you're very alert, but you're not spastic like, on so many stimulants. You can.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Denver Dzogchen podcast. I'm here once again with Joseph Wagner, and today we're going to talk about a very fun topic, Joe's drug of choice. In fact, it is the Buddhist drug of choice is caffeine, and in fact, probably the world's drug of choice is caffeine.
Really
but
is.
Tea has had a special relationship to Buddhism for a long, long time, and Joe loves tea. So, Joe, give us the tea. Spill the tea,
Thanks.
as they say.
Spill the tea. Thank you, Damien. Good to see everyone here. Yeah, someone just asked about this, and I am a great lover of tea. I got involved in tea when I was in college. I became the student of a Zen teacher who was also an architecture professor at the university where I was, and she was a student of the Japanese tea ceremony. So I began to learn that. I studied that with her for a couple of years, and it was my first real opportunity to, of course we grew up drinking soda or whatever, but I never had a taste for coffee, so I wasn't drinking coffee at all. I still never drink coffee. But I got into tea, first in that ritualized way with the matcha that's become so popular now. At that time, you could only get it from one place in San Francisco that imported it from Japan. It wasn't even the best quality, but now it's on every corner. It's even my brother lives in Thailand, and he said there's matcha places everywhere. So it's kind of interesting, right? That was what started it, and that led me to find a book about tea by John Blofeld called The Chinese Art of Tea. And that introduced me to a new kind of way of looking at it. Then I moved to San Francisco. They had tea shops there. I got into tea a little bit. And then I moved to the very center of the tea world, to Taiwan. Taiwan is a place where the tea culture is very strong, or at least it was strong when I was there. I've heard mixed things since then. It still exists, but it's not like it was. But yeah, it melds so well with the Buddhist path, especially Zen, right? Zen is supposedly, the famous saying is, the taste of tea and the taste of Zen, very similar.
Yeah, so the magic thing about tea that makes it different than coffee, let's say, is this amino acid theanine. At least this is part of it, because it has the stimulation effect of caffeine, and then it has this calming effect from theanine, which makes for that Zen-like experience, right? You're able to sit and be alert, but also calm. Whereas most of coffee tends to give you a little bit too much on the revving, so you can supplement theanine on that one if you want to level it out.
We'll talk about that more. That's a very good idea.
Yeah, but so what is so special about this? How do you find that it connects to your practice? Have you noticed this stabilization?
Stabilization is not my middle name, but having been, I've been drinking tea in the Chinese style. Oolong teas mostly from Taiwan. I've been importing since I lived there in the 90s. It becomes the whole of it's different than coffee. The world's drug of choice is caffeine because it makes you a good worker bee, right? You can work in a more focused way than you can without it. And there's not coffee breaks are part of every contract and stuff. It's a thing. But coffee has many different alkaloids, not only caffeine, and it does have none of the calming effects of L-theanine, as you said. Well, tea, it's a much more balanced compound, and it's also more difficult to drink kind of on the go. It requires, of course, they have tea bags now and stuff like that. I usually drink loose leaf tea, but even with tea bags, you have to have the tea bag and the container, and you have to steep it for a certain amount of time. It requires attention. Tea is a very more demanding kind of compound, and as a result of that, it forces you, if you're like I am, I tend to drink tea a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, and have done that for more than 30 years. It forces you into a kind of a meditative lifestyle because you have to sit down and do it. And for many years, I used the little I Ching clay pots from China to do it in the totally traditional style. I've changed it a little bit because I think I've got a style that makes the tea a little better, but it still requires that you sit down, you steep each little cup, and you pour it out after a certain amount of time, and it just requires your attention. And that attention combined with the uplifting effects of caffeine and the calming and sort of smoothing out effects of theanine, it induces a kind of zen state where you're very alert, but you're not spastic like, on so many stimulants you can be. So yeah, I have found it to be incredibly supportive. I guess that I don't even think of it as a drug in my own use of it in my life. I think of it as an ally, a plant ally, like Carlos Castaneda was always talking about. And I've found, this is a little plug for tea, that it makes an excellent ally. I have been drinking tea every day for more than 30 years, almost 35 years. And hardly ever miss a day because, when you're an addict, you arrange your life around it. And I think it's kept me quite healthy. I feel healthy and I feel kind of in pretty good shape, even though I'm in my mid 50s. And I attribute some of that to tea. And I know I've noticed it with other people. My brother has a similar experience and he's been drinking tea a long time. And many other people I know who have tea as their personal ally. It seems to support not only the meditative lifestyle, but lifestyle in general and health in general.
Yeah, I think it's great to look at it that way, that the plant is more than just a plant, right? That there's something to it. And maybe it'd be helpful to explain to people, so not everybody knows, tea is, there's white tea, black tea, green tea, oolong, and these are all the same tea. So maybe you could give a little introduction to tea, because maybe not everybody knows this.
There are really two families of tea. There's herbal tea, what is called herbal tea, and then there's real tea. Herbal teas are not teas. They're various herbs or plants that, like mint or chamomile, which may have psychoactive effects. Chamomile can be calming, can help induce good sleep and so forth. But they're not made from the same plant as the actual tea plant, which is Camellia sinensis. Camellia sinensis originated in China and then was brought to India by the British, and it grows there as Darjeeling and other kinds of Assam teas. But the real heartland of tea production is still China. And because the mountains of Taiwan are very high, but also very wet, then it's an excellent place to grow tea too. But between Taiwan and China, the best teas in the world are produced. And they're all produced from this same plant, Camellia sinensis. But like wine, which are all produced from grapes, there are many subspecies in there and many different varietals. And then when you pick the tea in its lifespan and how you treat the tea afterwards determines the different flavor profiles and also the different types of tea. There's, as you said, there's white tea, there's green tea, there's oolong tea, and there's black tea. Really, there are three main types: green tea, oolong tea, and black tea. And that has to do with how long the oxidization process is allowed to take place. There are enzymes in the leaves. When they're picked, the leaves are usually rolled or crushed or manipulated in some way to release, to break the cell wall and release the enzymes. And those start to process the tea, oxidize the tea. It's not a fermentation process in this particular kind, but if you leave it, just like if you pick a leaf off a tree, it goes through various stages toward brown and crumbly. The same thing is being done with the Camellia sinensis leaf. And if you pick it and roll it just a tiny bit and then steam it right away, you get green tea, where the enzymatic activity has not digested the tea at all. If it's anywhere between green tea and black tea, it's called oolong tea, which has many as a wide variety of different types and ranges from almost like green tea to but more smooth usually to almost like black tea, like a tea guan yin, which is an oolong. And then if you let it oxidize all the way, you get black tea, Assam teas, the red teas of China, and so forth. Darjeeling is also a black tea, and that range is what makes up all the different world of tea. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of different types of tea and different types of different aspects of even within, say, one type of tea like green tea. There are hundreds of different green teas depending on where they're grown, how they're processed, what the water's like in that area, the mineral content, and so forth. It's a thing like wine, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is fun to talk about because it opens us up to this whole world of playing with the chemistry of our minds, right? Like I'm a Seattle person, so I drink coffee. I make espresso every day. I have a little espresso machine. But I do run into the kind of over jittery sometimes. But I also wanted to bring up here, as a special education teacher, I know that people who have ADHD, caffeine actually calms them down rather than speeding them up. So if you find yourself that coffee or whatever makes you kind of feel tired, then you might have ADHD, right? Because we run low on dopamine, and caffeine increases your dopamine production. So it actually helps people find it it's like a medication for people who need a little bit of boost there. So coffee and tea can fulfill this role. But we mentioned briefly, there's an amino acid that you can get very cheap on Amazon everywhere called L-theanine. And this special compound is really only found in tea, but is also synthesized now. And if you take that with your coffee, it really levels out that like hard edge of the caffeine that you can run into with coffee. So I highly recommend that for meditation, and for, if you're overdoing it on coffee at all and you find yourself kind of anxious, theanine will take that off. So that's a beneficial thing we can borrow from the tea drinkers if you're a coffee drinker. Okay. And also recognizing that what is it that we're after in this state of meditation, right? It is exactly like they say that it's like Zen, right? Where we need to be very awake and alert, but we also need to be very calm and relaxed. And that combination is exactly what we're all going for. So I think that there's like a teaching in here somewhere. So maybe
There's
Joe,
no
you
doubt.
can kind of pull
There's
that
no
out.
doubt. I mean, to expand slightly on the theanine, use of L-theanine, you can buy this on Amazon in bulk. It's very difficult to overdose. You could eat grams and grams of it. The actual dose that is usually recommended for sleep or for balancing out too much caffeine or just too much stimulation from whatever source is about 400 or 500 milligrams. Even less than that can do it, and it doesn't taste bad. It has a slightly sweet taste, which adds some of the sweetness to some kinds of tea. And taking a capsule of this or a little spoonful of this along with coffee really changes the profile of coffee and how it works in your system. It also makes it last a little, the jitteriness and sort of awakeness that you sometimes feel if you drink coffee throughout the day. And it makes it easier to fall asleep at night if you take theanine. So I appreciate you mentioning that because it's such an important thing for us to know about, because if we are chemical machines. Our bodies are chemical machines. All of the processes have a chemical aspect to them, and better living through chemistry is how smart people live, right? Even if what you're doing is not having any stimulants. That's also better living through chemistry. We're not encouraging everyone to get into stimulants. Actually, I am, because I love it so much. But for those of you who have transcended the need for caffeine, I bow in your direction. But if you are using that, being smart about how to do it helps to bring our use of substances, and all things we put in our body are substances with psychoactive effects. If you're hungry, then if you're like me, you become hangry, right? A combination of hungry and angry. What is the cure for that? It's food, right? When you put food in your system, your nervous system settles down, you calm down, right? It's the same thing with everything in our lives. I'm not encouraging everyone to take up a bunch of funny things to use to try to increase their abilities, whether it's nootropics or whatever. But if you're already doing this, you want to be as smart as possible about how you do it, right? So I would say, with almost no exceptions, people who listen to this podcast are drinking caffeine tea, coffee. Maybe they're even taking caffeine pills, which strongly don't recommend that. But if you add L-theanine to this, it becomes much more of a mind-enhancing compound. And whether it's coffee, tea, or straight caffeine, or yerba mate, or guarana, or any of these things, a little theanine balances that out. Keeps you from the jangliness, because there's so many different alkaloids in coffee. The jangliness taking over your personality, so to speak. You might be quite surprised. So I think in general, we talk about tea, and I specifically love tea because it forces you, as I said, into a meditative situation. You got to sit there. You can't be running around. The tea doesn't like it, especially if you're drinking sort of fancy teas or pu'er teas, which is a type of fermented tea. You have to pay attention to it. It takes a certain amount of time, and it requires your attention. And it pays back with this openness and this calmness while you're still alert. I don't know about the people here, but I run kind of sleep deprived generally. I get up very early. I don't tend to go to bed as early as I should. And if I just sit still for a while, I feel sleepy. I feel like, oh, here we go. If it's combined with something like tea, you can coast that relaxation while still being alert enough to do your practice, which is fantastic. And that's why tea is a fixture of Chinese culture in and out of the meditation world. Anyway, I'll tell a story about how tea came about according to the Chinese, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I haven't fully fleshed this out, but I'm very interested in brain chemistry and dopamine, which is this really interesting part of the brain that everybody's been talking about lately. It has largely to do with like your desire to achieve things, right? It's what makes you pursue a goal. And what I think that happened, the Japanese, especially the Zen people, really figured this out, that when you're not stimulated, when you bring your sensation way, 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 way down, and tea is helpful for this because it increases your dopamine and it doesn't dump your dopamine, right? So like most pleasurable experiences dump your dopamine, which means you have a peak experience of pleasure and dopamine, right? And then you crash and you go below baseline afterwards. And then it takes a while to recover. So the Zen people figured out how to ride this pleasurable state to where you could like look at a tree and get this hit of pleasure without dumping, right? Like just simple, beautiful appreciation of the moment that allowed for more bliss, I think, in their experience and meditation. That when we're on our phones and scrolling and stuff that we have no access to, right? This is like, I think what modern practitioners probably struggle with the most. I know I do, right? We're overstimulated all the time. Pleasure is too accessible. Our food is too tasty. Our phone is too distracting. And our system's blown out continuously because we're overstimulated, and then we're crashed and we feel like shit. So then we seek more and more and more. And this is the cycle of samsara, right? And why our world in some ways you could say is like turning into a hungry ghost realm, because we're all running on empty. So I think that we can learn a lot from, and I learned this early in my path and I'm not good at doing it, but the Japanese Zen culture and the tea culture, they have this thing figured out. And I know, Joe, you've worked with this a little bit, so I think it's worth mentioning this kind of approach to life that can really...
It is. I mean, what are we really doing? I mean, that's all beautifully said. I feel you're absolutely right. What are we really doing as practitioners? What is our goal? It's to make every moment the peak experience, so to speak. If you read about peak experiences, the psychologist most associated is Maslow, and his best biographer, I think, is Colin Wilson. There's quite a bit about that, about the peak experience. But as you say, if we're only seeking peak experiences, you can't have a peak without a valley, right? And so your life becomes like this. In fact, it can even be more stretched out when you have this notion, I'm going to squeeze every moment to the maximum, and like this carpe diem, wrong-headed carpe diem attitude. What I think we're really trying to do as practitioners, and this is very straightforwardly stated in the Dzogchen teachings, is the goal is not a peak experience, it's an experience of completeness or wholeness. And since we are living in a world in which everyone is adjusting their chemistry purposefully, whether it's through eating sugar or doing exercise or whatever, all of which, we should be doing to the best degree we can, it's wise to bring onto the path whatever our main support for this life is, whether it's coffee or tea or whatever. And it's wise to structure that in a way that has a ritualistic aspect to it. It works better, and you're more likely to have these moments of completeness, of fullness, in which, if you're a Dzogchen practitioner or a Buddhist practitioner, you can recognize the nature of mind in a more complete way, rather than just rushing, okay, next thing, this kind of attitude, which is, pervasive to our culture. And I think you're absolutely right about this. And our goal is to have every day of our lives be the same in the sense that it is one big ritual. A good book about this topic is The Natural Mind by Andrew Weil. Andrew Weil of True Foods fame and 8 Weeks to Complete Health or whatever, big beard, beautiful guy. And some of his early books, Natural Mind and also Union of the Sun and Moon, very interesting. And he goes into some depth about this, about how important it is if we're going to put something in our bodies, some kind of compound, a drug, so to speak, to do that in as ritualistic a way as possible, which is one of the things I love about tea, because it forces you into a situation where you can't pound it. There's no way to do it. You just can't do it fast enough to get that kind of effect. Although they do have these big containers, everyone's wandering around in China with pounding the tea, so you can get some kind of aspect of that. But I think it's really important to try to structure our lives to be as meditative as a whole as we can. This is increasingly difficult as we get sped up into the AI-driven world of tomorrow. We're so busy with work, everybody's got a family, money is an issue everywhere, and every other thing in the world is like chaos. That makes it even more important to have a place where you can sit down. We need really two places. We need our cushion where we do our practice in a formal way, and we need our informal cushion. Like I have this tea table I've had for a long time, and when I need to do something, I can sit here, maybe I can write an email, I can drink some tea, and I can recalibrate my system. So I think that's what you're talking about, and it's definitely been a part of my whole experience of Buddhism. They're really united. So I invite other people to unite their use of these things, whatever they happen to be, with this kind of attitude. It makes your life more rich.
Yeah, and if you're a Vajrayana practitioner, some very simple things you could do is you could put a little dutsi in your coffee, and then you can offer it as a soak. Right? You don't have to do the dutsi part, but if you have it, that's the one thing you can do.
Of course.
But just making an offering at the least of everything you eat and drink throughout the day, don't skip on that, right? Like that's such an easy way to make merit, which is to say connect to your true nature, right? As a ritualized thing, even if it just takes 2 seconds, you just go Ram Yam Ka Mo Ma Hung, even if that's all you do, and just visualize it becoming infinite and offering that to the Buddhas, etc. That simple thing, even that little of a thing, now turns this kind of neutral or even maybe kind of negative addiction into part of the path. So, yeah, we shouldn't skip on that for sure.
Yeah, we'll revisit this topic. There's a lot to say about this because we're really trying to orchestrate our lives to be a retreat. Even if we have to work and we have family and we have other things, every aspect is that kind of the same thing you do in retreat, right? You don't just only sit in retreat. You still have to prepare your food. You still have to throw out the protector offering. You got to do stuff. So maybe our protector offering is feeding the children. And maybe our exercise that we have to get is going to the gym as opposed to, doing tsalung or whatever. But the more we do that, the more we realize we're in retreat right now. This is happening right now. This is not something that's going to happen when we get done with work. It is the work of this life.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about this tradition is that we can transform everything from going to the gym to scrolling on our phone to a ritual, to a practice. If we just use our mind and the bodhicitta motivation, it can be done.
That's the very meaning of Tantra. Tantra means continuity. Continuity off the cushion because we're on the cushion. That warp and woof of our life fitting together. So, good topic. I'm glad we talked about this.
Totally. Well, thank you so much, as always, everybody, for watching, following, liking, commenting, all of that. We really appreciate it. You'll be looking out for on Wednesday nights. We have our live guided meditation that Joe does at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That's excellent. We've been doing threefold sky gazing, so that's been very interesting. So I hope you'll join us. You can watch that live, or you can just watch it later on. It'll be on our channel. And then also, some of you probably saw our last episode. We're doing the Light of Wisdom study. I'm going to go through at least the first volume and put that on YouTube. And if you're interested in following along, then you can contact us through the email address, and I think Ricky's going to put that at the beginning of this episode, so you probably saw a QR code that you can scan if you're interested in joining our Sangha. Because really, there's a few requirements to join our Sangha, and next episode, we are going to talk about what that looks like. What is our Sangha? What is the history of it? What does joining it take? All of that. So I think that'll be very interesting. So I look forward to talking with Joe next time, and I hope you'll enjoy it, and we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.